Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
Hello, good morning. On behalf of the Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard Divinity School, it's my great honor to welcome you back. For those of you who were with us in person yesterday or are online, welcome back. And for those of you who are joining for the first time today, welcome. I said of this gathering yesterday that our intention was to cultivate a diverse ecosystem of thought, and I think we started to plant some really valuable seeds towards that end yesterday that will continue to deepen and take root today. And I also mentioned an occupational hazard of these kinds of larger academic conferences is that they can feel like a one-way conversation. So I hope many of you have found the time to deepen the conversation over coffee, and will continue to do so today, maybe as we're walking around the Arboretum. And that leads me to another occupational hazard of academic conferences is that they can often remove us from being in direct relationship to place and to other species. And so I just want to take a moment to really thank the Arboretum team, Nikita, Matt, and Ned, who we will hear from later, for making it possible for us to go to the Arboretum together and engage in some of the ways of knowing and the sense perception, the participatory sense perception, the empathy that Monica invited us into yesterday as we get to know some of the trees and other woody plants at the Arnold Arboretum. Final quick thing as we're talking about inviting in other species to this conversation. You guys are giving me the coolest gifts. Rebecca McMacken, who we will hear from later today, gave me this morning, and I just wanted to invite this being into the room as part of our conversation. This is a petunia that has been genetically spliced with bioluminescent fungi. So it glows, and my understanding is the sort of like life force of it is the kind of, I'm not a scientist, I'm doing this really well now, it glows most intensely, so these buds here will glow more intensely than the flowers, for example. So I'm just gonna leave this up on the stage as a presence with us, reminding us of some of the things we touched on yesterday in symbiogenesis, as well as the composite nature of being, and that we can't really, grafting all of these conversations, we can't really draw strict lines between plants and fungi. So I will leave this here, and I will welcome up my colleague Russ Powell, who will orient us towards the day and cue up our first keynote conversation with Juliana. So thank you, and Russ Powell, I want to welcome you to the stage.
Thanks, Rachel. So it's a joy to help welcome you to the second day of our Thinking with Plants and Fungi conference. Rachel, as she said, asked that I help to sort of roll out today's program. Thank you for being here and for thinking and sensing and wandering and wondering with us. If you came away from yesterday feeling like your mind had been mycelially rewired, your categories composted, your thoughts pollinated, good. Today we have another full day of richly provocative encounters ahead, a day that will keep asking us not just to think about plants and fungi, but to let our very thinking become more plant-like, rooted and reaching, slow and sudden, distributed, generous, alive. Before we turn to today, let me briefly say a couple things about where we've been. Yesterday began with Merlin Sheldrake in conversation with Rachel Peterson, a wide-ranging and delightfully unpredictable discussion that somehow moved from underground fungal networks to Ted Lasso, all the while circling around the maintenance of wonder in scientific inquiry. Zoe Schlanger took us on her own odyssey through the drama of plant thinking, a journey that involved a personal reorientation to the vegetal world. Elizabeth van Valkenburg reminded us that one of the great gifts of science is to be proven wrong and to find delight in the not knowing that precedes new understanding. Ernesto Giannoli, meanwhile, invited us to a rigorous and honest science that meets plant life not with projection or fantasy, but with clarity, courage, and care. Later in the day, we were treated to rich recoveries of thinkers whose work continues to bear fruit. Jacob Erickson on Agnes Arbor, and Samira Danishvar on Lynn Margulis, each reanimating these crucial figures who dared to think differently with plants. We then heard from Emanuele Coccia, who proposed that the life of plants isn't something we can observe from afar because we're already grafted into it. Giovanni Aloy asked what a plant realism without deceit might require of our perceptual habits, and Sean Parkinson offered a sensory revelation of fungal odors, ensuring that from here on, none of us will think of the smell of mushrooms in quite the same way. What struck me most about yesterday's diverse offerings wasn't their variety, though they were nothing if not varied, but the quiet commonality that ran beneath them. Again and again, we heard stories of retreat, of stepping back, stepping away, stepping out, that became occasions for theoretical, philosophical, or even existential insight. Merlin spoke of retreating to the soil, of getting his hands dirty as a way of becoming more fungal in his habits of mind. Zoe quit her job, she said, to go sit with botanists, to slow down and relearn her senses. Elizabeth picked up The Secret Life of Plants, a non-scientific book, and found herself nudged in new directions. Ernesto's encounter with the boquilla vine in Chile began when he simply went for a walk to see what he could. Jacob and Samira's thinkers, Arber and Margulis, each stepped outside of disciplinary norms to think otherwise, with, alongside, and as plant life. Emanuele suggested that even cities might be retreats, not from, but for nature. And Giovanni and Sean took us through the kind of perceptual retreats that make room for overlooked sensations. Now, as a scholar of environmental ethics like I am, I'm attuned to the ambivalence surrounding the idea of retreat. In the American environmental tradition, in particular, retreat is both celebrated and scrutinized. It often carries the image of the alienated white man, leaving behind society to discover, to reconstitute himself in the wild. And indeed, Henry David Thoreau, just a few miles from where we're gathered right now, built his cabin at Walden Pond to do precisely that. The roots of this myth are deep and winding, from John Muir's ecstatic departures to John Burroughs' slow observations, Edward Abbey's desert solitude to Aldo Leopold's shack-side revelations. But it's not just the dead white guy canon. Figures like Rachel Carson, Terry Tempest Williams, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Laurette Savoy, and so many more have also taken up the practice of retreat, not to escape the world, but to re-enter it differently, more responsibly. And that's what I kept hearing yesterday. Not escapism, but commitment. A retreat away, sure, but also toward perception, attention, toward the humility and honesty required to meet more than human life on its own terms. These aren't acts of disappearance, but reorientation. Which got me thinking, in critical plant and fungal studies, there's a rightful concern about anthropomorphism, about placing too much emphasis on the human when engaging with beings in life ways that exceed, ignore, or outlast our categories. And they always outlast our categories. But maybe part of what we're doing here isn't so much projecting humanity onto plants and fungi, but reflecting on what it is that we humans do or can do when we take these lives seriously. We retreat. We take time. We slow down. We take stock. And if we do so with genuine openness, we hear the world answer back. A plant catches our eye and becomes all we see. A smell floods our experience, our memory. Just the touch from the more than human unsettles our frameworks. We feel fungal. We feel strange. We think, which in our current cultural moment might be the most radical act of all. The philosopher and author Iris Murdoch once wrote, "I am looking out of my window in an anxious and resentful state of mind, oblivious to my surroundings, brooding perhaps on some damage done to my prestige. Then suddenly I observe a hovering kestrel. In a moment, everything is altered. The brooding self with its hurt vanity has disappeared. There is now nothing but kestrel. Murdoch wasn't talking about plants or fungi, of course, but the shift she describes, the momentary decentering of the self through perception, attention, encounter, echoes what many of our speakers described yesterday. Emerson, perhaps even more than Thoreau, gives us a language for this mode of inner transformation. In his essay, Compensation, he writes, "Every soul is by this intrinsic necessity quitting its whole system of things, its friends and home and laws and faith, as the shellfish crawls out of its beautiful but stony case because it no longer admits of its growth and slowly forms a new house." That seems to me a perfect metaphor for what we're trying to do here. We're loosening the shells of our settled ideals and ideas, noticing where our words have become rigid, calcified, and even, as Ernesto said yesterday, prison-like. We're exercising our human capacity to leave. And we'll get more chances to do that today. After this morning's sessions, which include Juliana Furcci's keynote address and an exciting panel on entangled ethics, after which lunch and Ned Freeman's own keynote address will follow, we'll then head outside. We'll leave this place, quite literally, and take our thinking elsewhere. At 1:30, buses will depart from outside the Divinity School's main entrance on Francis Avenue, this way, and we'll go to the Arnold Arboretum. There you'll have two options: to join a docent-led tour of the Arboretum's grounds, or to go on a self-guided tour. Well, you obviously have a third option, and it's simply to get lost. But whatever you do at the Arboretum, we hope you'll follow a sight, wait for a smell, listen to a tree, let yourself leave. Because after all, if there's anything we're learning, it's that leaving isn't withdrawal, it's metamorphosis. Thank you for being here, and here's to another day of radical retreat and vegetal thought. Tonight, we'll have more opportunity for such thought, specifically from 6 to 8 p.m. Thinking with Plants and Fungi postdoctoral fellow Ilitsa Koeva will host a reception for the opening of her art exhibition entitled Phantom Tree. So please see the Explore section of the conference program for more information on that, and we hope you'll join us for that gathering tonight as well. So it's now my pleasure to invite to the stage Professor Dawn Pfister, Asa Gray Research Professor of Systematic Biology here at Harvard University, to introduce our next keynote address. So please join me in welcoming Dawn.
Thank you very much. It's really such a pleasure to see this large group and to know that there's the interest in fungi and plants. I'm a mycologist, and as a mycologist, I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce Juliana Furcci. Before I really get to the details of Juliana, and we've known each other a while, I want to talk a little bit about fungi. Not so long ago, this conference would have been titled Thinking with Plants. That's it, Thinking with Plants. And why would that be? Well, that's because plants or fungi were subsumed under plants. And in fact, we have plants and animals. How simple can that be? Plants and animals. Well, it's not that simple, and we know that now, that it's not that simple. The living world of the past, flora and fauna, you'll see flora, fauna, and fungi. And Juliana was a big part of the funga move. And by the way, when you type that in your computer, you're always wrong. Funga, studying this kingdom. Fungi represent a distinct lineage, a kingdom of its own. That kingdom is vast. 1 million, 5 million, 8 million, maybe more. And the sad part is that if we're lucky, there may be 10% of the known fungi identified, recognizable. So a vast kingdom. I have spent my career at the Farlow Library and Herbarium of Cryptogamic Botany. That's just around the corner there, in a building that once was part of the Divinity School. And I have felt very privileged to be in that building. And in that building, and again, I'm saying the Herbarium of Cryptogamic Botany, those are really archaic terms. We're stuck with them, that's history. But cryptogamic botany, those organisms with hidden modes of reproduction, spore forming. And what does this include? Well, it includes bacteria, it includes algae, some of which are protists and some of which are real plants, mosses and liverworts, those are plants. Slime molds, those aren't even fungi, those are protists. Lichens, those are self-contained little ecosystems. Fantastic. And fungi. So we have all these kingdoms. And what are fungi? Fungi are unicellular. We've been talking a lot about mycelial fungi, but fungi are also unicellular, as well as being hyphal. They produce a variety of different kinds of spores, some swimming, some floating in the air, some being carried by animals, by insects, by us. They're aquatic, they're terrestrial, they're symbiotic at various levels, they're parasitic, they're saprobic. They have complicated mating systems, complex life cycles. They explode, they discharge spores into the air through explosive mechanisms. They perceive light. What more can you ask? What wonderful beasts they are. They're fascinating to observe, and they have complex and important physiological as well as ecological roles. And I brought along a little sample here. I'm sorry you're not all going to be able to see this. It is a vivid green-blue fungus, vivid in color, just fantastic. How cool can that be? This was isolated. This was isolated from a utility pole. Fungi are everywhere. They do amazing things. I don't want to lose that. So to Juliana, after all, we have fungi here. We're feeling fungal. We're part of the network here. Juliana has been instrumental in bringing fungi to the public, to realize that these are important organisms. They also represent a distinct kingdom. So she's put them on the map in a way. She's founded the Fungi Foundation and is the executive director. She's an associate, I'm proud to say, of the Harvard University Herbaria, a National Geographic explorer, a dame of the Order of the Star of Italy. Now, she's embarrassed by dame, and I told her this morning that she's in very good company. In the olden days, the wives of Harvard professors belonged to an organization. the Harvard Dames. She is deputy chair of the IUCN Fungal Conservation Committee, a fellow of the International Mycological Association, the author of a series of guidebooks for Chilean fungi. She's co-authored titles such as State of the World's Fungi, and the publication that delimits this term and introduces this term, funga. I hope you have our goddess in the talk. Yeah, she's in there. Oh, she's in there, good. And she initiated the fungal, flora, fauna, funga, the three F's proposal that has gained a much very broad audience. She's received many distinctions, and I'm going to name a few, but there are too many. And these include the 2022 Buffett National Geographic Leadership in Conservation in Latin America Award, the 2013 President's Award from the International Society of Fungal Conservation. She's a member of the advisory board of the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks, that's SPUN. There are many more boards and advisory committees that Juliana served on and has contributed to in a very, very major way. But I'd not be remiss not to mention that along with co-authoring papers with her, I know her best as a field mycologist. She collects, she photographs, she describes, she identifies a wide array of fungi. She, with the Fungal Foundation, has provided logistical support for many, many expeditions into Chile. And for that, that ranges from the deserts in the north to Tierra del Fuego. So hers is a really important part of thinking about how fungi have come to be part of our consciousness. They aren't plants, they are themselves. They are fungi. So today, her talk is Global Patterns of Ancient Human Relationships with Fungi. Juliana, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much, Don. I'm just going to switch computers so that... Well, hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you very, very much for the invitation, and thank you, Don. Don failed to say that the most important, one of the most important things, alongside Charles Stang, I am also very proud to have you as my mentor and friend, and I'm very proud of that, so thank you very much. Walking with Don in the forests of Patagonia is a joy, and I hope that many of you have that opportunity in the future. So, Fungi Foundation. I am the director of this organization that was the first nonprofit in the world dedicated to fungal conservation. We're almost 15 years old. We were founded in Chile, and we are an organization that has opened office in the United States. So going against the current, normally it's US NGOs opening in Chile or in South America. We did it the other way around. And now opening an office in India. And we work globally in different countries and also in different aspects of global life. There are several programs. I will talk a bit more about conservation and elders, but and not talk so much about education and expeditions. But how many of you heard Merlin talk yesterday? Okay, a lot of you. So you'd be pleased to see Merlin reaching into the soil. I just wanted to show you what that looked like. That was the situation in the pouring rain about a month ago, or a bit over a month ago. The braid, the plait, is Toby Kears, and yeah, we were giving him a lot of moral support there. Sorry, Mel. Anyway, to move on with the conservation piece, I'll be talking a bit about this 3F proposal. But to get there, I just wanted to start with a feeling of profound injustice that came over not only myself, but many of my friends and colleagues many years ago, realizing that wherever you looked in conservation frameworks and biodiversity conservation legislation, etc., it was always talking about animals and plants, or just these two Fs, fauna and flora, to talk about macroscopic life on Earth. And let's be honest, that's just incorrect. I mean, it's just not true, right? Macroscopic life on Earth is not represented just by plants and animals. And so we were looking and seeing all over the place, all across the globe, there were these pieces of legislation that were missing really the organisms that make systems ecosystems, which are the fungi. And you can say fungi, fungi, fungi. I'll probably be switching the whole way. It doesn't matter. The important thing is just to say it. Never stop saying it. And that realization, that sense of injustice, was basically the fuel that that I needed to found the Fungi Foundation. And when that happened, the first undertaking of ours was to trigger the inclusion of fungi in environmental legislation in Chile. And in between 2010 and 2013, we helped the government and managed to trigger the inclusion of fungi alongside plants and animals at the highest legislative level in the environmental law in Chile. And Chile became the first country in the world to incorporate fungi alongside plants and animals. And then that regulation trickled into fungi being included in environmental impact assessments. So every environmental impact assessment in Chile has to include a fungal baseline study. And suddenly fungi became a conservation tool, right? So you can have an endangered tree, an endangered animal, but there are also endangered fungi that can be binding and that can trigger habitat conservation and more. And that was really encouraging. We were quite happy with that, and it worked out, and we took on the task, and we've been red listing species and working to train people, committees in the government to be able to read these assessments, etc. But it really wasn't enough. Still at a global level, this third F was missing. And so, the goddess isn't there, Don, but I mean, sorry, the paper. In this paper, you'll find a beautiful goddess that Don would love us all to see. But in 2018, under the mentorship of Don, you'll see him there as a senior author, 3 Latin Americans, an Argentine, Brazilian, and a Chilean, came together, as the paper says, in an informal gathering during a congress. Of course, we were having a drink and getting worked up because fungi weren't included in legislation. And we came up with the idea to explore what the wording would be like, what the terminology would be like, and what we should do to abolish the 2 Fs. And although funga, the term funga that is now placed alongside fauna and flora to talk about macroscopic diversity of fungi in a given place or time, is not a word that's rooted in the Latin or Greek. If we were to be, scientifically rigorous, we would say fauna, flora, and mycota, fauna, flora, and mycobiota, but it just doesn't sound right. There's something not happening there. So we looked back into literature, and there was this term funga that was used in Scandinavia that had also been explored as alongside mycota and mycobiota to refer to fungal diversity of a given place or time. And we delimited this phrase and proposed the 3 Fs as a way forward for rapid inclusion of fungi in legislation and education. And it took off. I mean, this was 2018. Today, in close to 30 countries, the term has been incorporated at some level in governments. Countries have included the word, for example, in institutions, dictionaries in different places. Organizations have incorporated the 3 Fs. And most importantly, what happened with the 3 Fs is that that it was a quick way for fungi to be included, and we made it cool, and we made it shameful not to do it, to the extent that for the last year in April, for the first time in over 130 years, National Geographic put fungi on the cover of their magazine. Woo! In all languages, everywhere. But not only did they put fungi on the cover and do a cover story, there were over 40 pages in the edition. They also did the sexiest centerfold I've ever seen, that you open up and it's the fungal tree of life. 4 pages spread. It was really, really exciting. But that really was just what was visible on the outside. But what National Geographic did, and National Geographic Society, was to change the definition of wildlife. And they included fungi in their definition of wildlife, and therefore they unlocked the funding for grants that were looking at mycology. That's, for us at the Fungi Foundation, that's the real success. This is the bling bling, but bling bling is important. But today, fungi are included in that definition of wildlife, and in many places and in different legislations, the definitions of wildlife and biodiversity and life on Earth they are being modified. Another thing that we do at the Fungi Foundation are short films. We really like making films, and I just wanted to just invite you all to go onto YouTube and see at Fungi Foundation, and you'll be able to see some. There are different pieces. Some are quite philosophical, some are more scientific, but you'll see us in the field, in the forest. We also work a lot with artistic research, and since 2012, we've been working with artists around the globe, presenting in different biennales, from Sao Paulo to La Habana to Venice and others. And I just wanted to flag the Song of the Cedars. Cesar is here, Cesar Rodriguez Garavito from the More Than Human Life Project at NYU. And together with, this is a song made by Cosmo Sheldrake and Robert McFarlane, Cesar, myself, and the Los Cedros Cloud Forest, which is protected under rights of nature. And we have filed a legal petition for the cloud forest to be recognized as a co-author of the song, and that's actually at the moment in process in Ecuador, in offices and in the future in courts. But a forest that has legal rights, and how does that translate, for example, to the arts? So the song was made in the forest with the forest, and it's undoubtedly a co-author. And now we're just translating we're striving to, and I'm sure we will succeed, Cesar, to translate those rights into the co-authorship. But when you fall in love with fungi, how many of you are in love with fungi? Come on. Yeah, I mean, they're just the best, aren't they? I mean, life is better with fungi, for sure. Come on, yeast, no wine, no beer, no bread, no coffee, no chocolate. No. Every time we do a cheers, we must thank the fungi. But when many of us, you get turned on to fungi through different ways. This wasn't the start of my fungal love, but it definitely fueled it. I was in a museum in Punta Arenas, the southern tip of South America. It's a museum called Maggiorino Borgatello, I think. It's an Italian priest. And I see this base of a giant puffball on exhibit, and it says it's a fire starter used by the Fuegan people, the Selknam. And it was just really, really striking. I'd seen the puffball in the field. There is Calvasia, Bejín, they call it tabaquera, many names. Edible when young. The spores are medicinal, and they're used for, well, we'll see in a bit. And then this sterile base is used to start fire. And it was just incredible, it was one of the first times I was like, wow, in this extreme environment, humans have formed a relationship, a fundamental relationship, a life-saving relationship with a fungus, not through edibility, but through starting fire. And then, how many of you know Otzi? So Otzi the Iceman, right, he was found in the Alps when a glacier melted. They found him like that, but National Geographic said he's looked like that, so I just put him in as well. But Otzi was carrying different fungi, and one was a fire starter as well. It was a conch, believed to be a fire starter, another medicinal fungus, supposedly to treat parasites, stomach infections, etc. And so again, I was like, wow, and Otzi lived over 5,000 years ago, and he had this relationship with fungi to start fire, to transport fire. There's another theory that you could carry embers inside a hollowed out conch. And then I went on a trip to Southeast Asia, and I was in Cambodia, and I'd heard of this. There's a man called John Allen who has studied psychedelic fungi for a long time, and he had published these short books. And there was this image of a bas relief in Angkor Wat, and of course I was like, I have to find it. It took me about 5 hours, but here we are with the deity Shiva holding what seems to be a mushroom. And again, this is really, really old. And so again and again, I was seeing all these relationships that, you're thinking, people forever, all over, have these relationships. And some are common. The relationship between mushroom apparition and lightning, you can find described everywhere. I mean, to date, there are places where children are made to, when there's a storm, it's like, look out the window, make sure you see where lightning strikes, because tomorrow we're going to go and get the mushrooms. And you'll find it from the ancient Greeks, who linked apparition of mushrooms to thunderbolts. In Mesoamerica, even the words sometimes, there's the same word for Amanita muscaria than lightning, a thunderbolt, in Guatemala. And there's current really, really exciting research that's showing that electrical pulses can actually double mushroom yields in cultivation, and that's research that's going on now. So, it was the pandemic, and there was a bit more time to think, and I thought, well, how about building a map? Why don't we collate all the information that's been published from peer-reviewed science, general publications, and oral history, and try to understand where there are relationships that aren't about edibility with fungi around the world. Ceremonial use, medicinal, cosmetic, textile, etc. Ornamental. And so we put together a map. And this map was showing all around the world, these are just some of the entries, showing relationships with fungi. Some were similar, so the same type of fungus in different parts of the world was relating to humans in the same way, apparently with no connection. So the Miwok people in Yosemite with indigenous peoples in Colombia, with indigenous peoples in Australia, having evolved the same relationship with the same type of fungus. And so we could unpack and analyze a lot of these data. And we were seeing that, for example, with puffballs, there's a widespread relationship, mainly to treat wounds. And so the spores of the giant puffball, as I showed in the slides before, are used to treat wounds and to heal wounds. And today you can go, for example, in South America and other places, you'll find what is it called? Pastor. Thank you, a shepherd. So shepherds with their animals in the mountains, and they all carry little bags with puffball spores in case the animals are wounded. And you can find that pretty widespread. With conchs also, so conchs that are like big wood ears, relationships that are really, really common and widespread, mostly for tinder, so to start fire, around the world. But it was great. We were seeing all these cultural coevolutions and everything, but at one moment we were like, but wait, most of these relationships have been documented without free, prior, and informed educated consent. Most of the documents that we were collating, most of the papers, had what we call, this colonial extractivism way of documenting the information. And amplifying that is being complicit. And we felt that we couldn't, and then defined that we won't do that as an organization. And therefore, this whole effort of the map was just stopped. It was like, no, we cannot publish this. We cannot be part of amplifying this way of finding knowledge. And so what do? We can't just stop the program. There's a situation, there are challenges, and there's an urgency. The information, these relationships with fungi are held by elders in communities, by grandparents who learnt from their grandparents, but whose grandchildren today live in the city and are not going out to the forest with them. And so there's no oral transmission of these relationships. So, and as every time we're out in the field, as Don says, I spend a lot of time in the field, and every time you go, the elders are saying, we have these relationships, we've learned them from our grandparents, but our grandchildren are gone. This is about to be lost. We're just in time. And that's one thing they say. The other thing they say is, nobody's ever asked us about our relationships with fungi before. And it really makes me emotional, because they've asked them about medicinal plants, they've asked them about so many other relationships with plants and animals, but never with the fungi. So it creates an urgency. And then, of course, the challenges and the issues of loss of language, of how do we address data sovereignty, etc. And I wrote Ayuda a Vivir. Ayuda a Vivir is to help live. There's an urgency because in these relationships with fungi, there are ways that humans have come to know and come to relate with them that help us live in a changing world, that have helped us live to get to where we are today. And in this changing world, it's those ways that help us live on the planet in that fungal nature-based solution that we can rely on. So losing it is pretty serious, and it's serious stuff, as they say. So we were like, okay, we've got all this information, there's more and more, let's look at the ethical guidelines, let's look at ethnobotany, let's look around. And we found, first of all, I was like, okay, ethnomycology, there has to be some ethical guidelines. Nothing, there was nothing there. So we looked at botany and we found, but it wasn't fungal, it was botanical. And there are some very fundamental differences there. That's not just about words, it's about how you look at the world and the connectedness of the world. And also, most of these guidelines didn't incorporate a view of the rights of nature. And so the issue of fungi and others, for example, having rights, we've incorporated that into the guidelines. Of course, the 3 Fs weren't included, and the relevance of the voice of elders wasn't highlighted enough for us in what we saw in these different guidelines. So we wrote our own with 9 principles with groups of people from around the world. And you can find them here. You can scan the QR code. They're free. They're in 3 languages at the moment. There's a version up that will be updated in a couple of weeks. They're constantly evolving and improving. But we published these guidelines. We built them for our understanding of what we would and wouldn't do, what we think could and couldn't be done with information like that, but also to put it out into the world for there to be ethnomycological ethical guidelines. But the questions remained. So what do we do? Can we publish the information? Can't we publish the information? Do we continue to document or don't we? What do we do? We have to incorporate data sovereignty, right? We're not going to fall into this colonialist act of just taking a relationship and publishing it. I mean, there are companies patenting, a lot of the compounds and species that we know of relationships from the past, and so it's dangerous. Let's look for a repository of oral history, we said. So we started looking, and we found lots of repositories. most of them in the Northern Hemisphere. None really that could guarantee the sovereignty. So for example, you can go onto Smithsonian and find oral histories, but it's amplified. So there's no system in which indigenous peoples, traditional communities, and others can hold and decide not to share in the repositories. We then, through the More Than Human Life program at NYU, met Local Context, which is an incredible program that has a labeling system. So you can label, the holders of knowledge can label and choose how the information they decide to share is broadcast or not, etc. But still, it's not a repository. And so while I was going around the world, I'm talking to people, and first of all, sitting down to maybe conduct an interview, I was so apologetic the whole time. It's like, your relationship is going to be private, and you don't worry, and we're not going to share it with anybody, and we just want to record your relationship with fungi, and we're going to leave it to you on a thumb drive. This is where we are today. This is what we're doing today, and I'll show you a bit about that. It's like, literally, we're going around the world interviewing elders that desire to share the information. We put it on a thumb drive in that moment and leave it with them there. And we commit in writing or in recording to not use it. And we're really sorry. But most of the time, sometimes they would say, like, but why are you saying that? We want the world to know. We want you to share it. Would you please share this at a conference at Harvard? And I would be shocked. I'd be like, oh my. And I sort of realized that it's not all about, bringing on the baggage that one brings of this colonial extractivist point of view, but it's about listening more in that sense. And so what I'm going to share today, everything I'm going to share are recordings where it's desired for them, for the information to be shared. And there'll be a bit about the program. So we've been working in Oaxaca, in Mexico, opening a museum at the end of October with Historias y Memorias Mazatecas, a large archive by one of the town's photographers and videographers that rewrites a lot of the history that we know until now about the Mazatec people and their relationship, not only with fungi, but with some plants as well. In Chile, we've had the opportunity to build a relationship with a Mapuche elder, Don Tali. The videos I have are very short. They're about 1 minute, one and a half minutes. So I just wanted to show you this one. We're learning how the Mapuche nation relates to fungi through food, through healing, through tinder.
Esa ofrenda se le hace a la Ñuquemapo, no solamente llevarte lo que ella tiene, sino que también dejarle una semilla por intercambio de lo que ella lo va a entregar. Pilun mamuy, oreja de palo.
Usted dice que lo usan para trasladar fuego.
Para trasladar fuego.
¿Y cómo trasladan fuego ahí?
Porque dice que eso es una cáscara dura que tienen y dentro de ello le colocaban un fosforito, una piedrita caliente y eso se hacía que el fuego no se apagara. Y se podía trasladar de un lado a otro llevando fuego. No echaba humo, no echaba nada. La piedra iba dándole el calorcito a eso.
¿Quiere que le cuente algo entretenido?
Ya.
Se descongeló un glaciar allá en Europa y quedó el descubierto una momia, un hombre, cazador, recolector, que es la momia más antigua conocida de Europa. Le pusieron el nombre Otzi. Y Otzi andaba trayendo uno de estos donde trasladaba fuego. Y él vivió hace 5.000 años atrás en lo que es Europa ahora.
Mis abuelos nos contaban eso, que para eso eran esa oreja de palo.
It's one example of what's happening. And Don Tali, this was, I think this was it was after Peru, so maybe about 3 weeks ago. He wanted us to share this mushroom song that his grandfather would sing when he was out looking for mushrooms.
Mi nombre es Astarica Lincán, vivo en el loft de Regolín. El lugar donde yo vivo se llama Piuchenko, tierra de mi abuelo, de mi antepasado, creo. Entonces recuerdo una canción que él cantaba en Mapuzungún, que hoy día decimos canción, y en aquellos años eran el gol, se llama gol, ¿ya? Él gulcaba de esta manera, le cantaba a los abuelitos, le gulcaba. Decía, Kufuyana, 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 Pangema, Pangema, Kufuyana, Enche me mai kapange kufuyana kufuyana kapange mai kampole mai molei mi mai kufuyana eso le decía a mi abuelo. Y en la traducción decía, Longuito, longuito, ¿dónde están longuito? ¿Dónde están longuito? Que vengan hacia mí, longuito, que vengan a ti, a mí, longuito. Estoy esperando aquí, honguito, estoy esperando aquí, honguito, honguito, my honguito, le decían los honguitos.
Honguitos.
Pero él, fuera de traducción, que hoy día, bajo el conocimiento del pueblo originario, mi abuelo hablaba muy poco en castellano. Por la traducción.
Translating there, but that's Don Tali with his grandfather's mushroom song. And we've also been working in India, where we've also learned that different tribes in northeastern India wanted to share their mushroom songs and their mushroom knowledge. And there's a documentary called The Mushroom Keepers, a short film. It's not a documentary, a short film. It's coming out next week through the Fungi Foundation channels. It will be on the YouTube. And it's worth seeing. And this is what two women, one from the Khasi and one from the Garo tribe in northeastern India, wanted to share.
Shana Pija, Iwan go so Tina Aya pay. Otit, bangin yo, Yabama you. Batin Naliki, so Bakitiaki, Kwan, Shuan Kit, but la. So, like Takaniki, Koa.
Mushroom Keepers, stay tuned for some information about that relationship. And with the help of anthropologist and field recordist Cosmo Sheldrake, we've been recording different ancestral relationships in different parts of the world. Some, for example, in Ecuador and other places, we've been asked not to share. We're not sharing them. What I'm showing here is what we've been asked to share. We were at 5,000 meters above sea level in Queros, in Peru, recording with Don Victor, and then recording in Corca, near Cusco, in a place called Cusibamba, with Doña Giraldina and Doña Leonarda, who wanted to share the song that they sing to call mushrooms that they had learned from their grandparents. It was raining.
Kunja jamana mama yo, echo jamana taitayo. Ay vidita vida mía, imaina yara kayu yasan. Ay vidita vida mía, imaina yara kayu yasan. Ruwakus kaita, chuhya charuwakus kaita. Wasi charuwakus kaita, chuhya charuwakus kaita. Suegra y paya canarusca, y maina yara cayuyasa. Suegra y paya canarusca, y maina yara cayuyasa. Munana koipas yachay paksi, weyuna koipas yachay paksi, mana yachaqa perdichinsi, mana yachaqa perdichinsi.
And that was in Quechua. And they sing that song while looking for mushrooms out in the field. And so after sharing this, I just wanted to talk a bit about what we're doing next. As I explained, we're going around the world, and because we haven't really come to a conclusion, and I'd love for help from anybody in this room that knows about repositories or possibilities and ways forward to be able to document in a under a data sovereignty framework to document these oral histories. What we've been doing is just recording and leaving the recording with people, in the schools, wherever they want to leave them. And we take a backup with a commitment to share or not share, however is desired. We don't, as a Fungi Foundation, we don't want to do anything with the information. We want to ensure that the grandchildren have a recording, or that the people in those communities have the recordings and the information of that relationship that is being lost, that nobody's ever asked about. And so that on the one hand, and on the other hand, what we've built now, and we're starting to build, is this Fungal Elders Conservation Forum. But instead of putting a culture at the center of the table with their relationship, we've decided to put the fungus at the center of the table. So for example, puffballs. We saw in that map that there are several peoples around the world that have this relationship. We want to bring them together around the puffball to hear, listen, and understand what they think needs to be done for the preservation of that relationship. And that's where we are now. And I've never, Don was mentioning lots of the things we do, and this wasn't in there because I've never shared this. This is the first time I've shared what we're doing in this program. And so I'm a bit nervous. But at the same time, I want to really, again, reach out. If anybody knows of a way forward, please come up and approach me afterwards. We really want to know. I'm just going to very quickly go over the references. If anybody wants to take pictures of the references. There are a lot. Because we're learning, we've just been trying really hard to get it right. And I want to thank some of the donors of the foundation. I've put this sitaria up there for Don. Don, there's a bit of Tierra del Fuego for you. And thank also the team at the Fungi Foundation, Don Neftali, and other people that shared their stories. Thank Cosmo Sheldrake for recording, and all his supporters and anthropologists and donors. And well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Juliana. This is all new to me in what you've been doing, and it's really exciting to hear about it, hear what you're doing. We don't have Soteria up there anymore.
Sorry. So the thing is, you know that fungi are a kingdom. I don't use kingdom. I drop the G because otherwise I would use queendom maybe. So I say kingdom. But they're a really broad group. And a morel mushroom and an oyster mushroom are as closely related as a flea and a whale. And some people study fleas, some study whales. This could be like the flea, but that's like the whale. And Don studies those, so we're leaving it up.
No, I wanted that to be there because I wanted you to say a little bit about it in Chile, and then I wondered if there are parallels for its use in the other parts of its distribution. This is a fungus that occurs on the tree family, Nothofagus, and that family of trees is distributed across the southern hemisphere. So are there parallels in usage that you know of?
So most of the relationship that humans have had with Sitaria is to eat them, as edibility. So you'll see the Fuegan people and Mapuches of the southern part of the distribution really enjoy them. There are 7 species, 5 of which in Chile and Argentina, 5 of which are eaten. Some are fermented to make booze, but I do not know in New Zealand or in other parts,
Australia,
in Australia and Tasmania, if the indigenous people ate them.
Yeah.
But they only have 2 species, right?
Maybe 3.
Maybe 3. Well, yeah, you'll tell us soon.
Yeah. Do you sing when you collect? I sometimes do.
I hum.
At least to myself.
Yeah, I have, yeah. What do you sing?
Oh, I make it up as I go along.
So I have a mushroom hum.
Where are you, mushroom? I need this.
No, but to answer your question, I have a mushroom hum that I've always, maybe you've heard it, I don't know, I tend to hum it. And this year, there's a Chilean artist called Cecilia Vicuña. She's a very important and wonderful woman and a dear friend. And we just recorded a duet with my hum and her singing. And again, Cosmo Sheldrake did the music to that piece, and it's going to be inaugurated in an exhibition in Brussels on the 5th of June, and my hum will be known to the world. I'm really nervous.
You're not going to do it?
No, I mean, I could, but I'm not going to.
Okay. I think you have an audience.
It goes something like, starts like that.
Great. So, thinking about all of this, I'm wondering if you want to expand a little bit on the ethics that you're outlining. I understand about the sharing and not sharing. What about publications and so forth, and materials that might be related?
It's really difficult. It's a very tricky one, Don, because what you see published many a time, for example, maybe a relationship with a fungus by the Mapuche, published by a scientist from another part of the world, where the indigenous people have shared that relationship without knowing that it's going to be published. And sometimes those relationships are medicinal, and when they're published, they are eligible for anybody to know and to then use or exploit. And I have not found the answer. I am stuck. I feel very stuck as director of the Fungi Foundation with the map of what to do. And so the conclusion with those publications, most of them are not. That relationship is not documented with free, prior, informed, and educated consent of the people that reach that relationship. So we're just basically going around the world documenting again and just leaving it with the people who hold the knowledge and not doing anything with it. But it's just a very tricky one of what to do. With the collections, it's the same case. Sometimes collections are have annotated data with them, metadata that speak about a relationship. And what we did with the MOTH program, More Than Human Life program, we went to the Ecuadorian Amazon to meet with the Sarayaku Nation last year in September, and we entered a very beautiful and complex data sovereignty agreement where the Fungi Foundation was collecting teaching them how to collect. We were collecting to look to see if there were species of interest or new species in their territory that could help with expanding the notion of the living forest, Kausaksacha. But there was a commitment that the metadata of any relationship would not be put on the information given into the fungarium, the national fungarium in Ecuador. So with the collection, we would give in, the specimen, the basic collection data, but nothing about the relationship.
I wonder if there are parallels, about the Nagoya Protocol. Are there parallels there? This has to do with the materials that are collected and moved and deposited and used in various ways. And there is the partnership with local communities and so forth as part of that.
Well, the interesting thing is, so when we're looking at repositories, and the repositories around the globe, many are here in the US, but did the US sign the Nagoya Protocol?
Not that I know of.
Exactly. So precise. So this is these voluntary agreements aren't sufficient to ensure that the data sovereignty is respected. So that's why we're stuck.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Juliana. This was great, and it's always fun to have these conversations. Thank you.
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2025, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.